Hello everyone, Simon here from the Wells of Wall Street. Today's video, LCX, and that is also the exchange, of course. We're going to be talking quickly about some of the partnerships and the integrations that are in there and why I'm so interested in this particular project. This is by no means a new kind of project or asset or exchange, but it's certainly one because of the way the market is at the moment, that it might be something that you want to be adding to your portfolio, or indeed something that you want to be accumulating more of if you've already got it. We'll go into a couple of reasons behind that in a second. I won't go into a huge amount of detail of LCX. We did do an intro video to that as part of the People's Crypto episode last year. We do need to do a new one of those actually. I think maybe episode 4 or 5 now. Can't really remember. But the LCX exchange for me is going to be an absolute powerhouse. One of the big things that I really respect and appreciate of LCX is its massive array of things like the regulations and the standardizations that it operates within already. Of course, most of the exchanges out there do have regulation, but for example, like Binance does have here in the UK FCA regulation and approval, but that is only applicable to certain aspects of what it does. If you remember, Binance had those big issues ages ago where it had to stop and suspend payments and withdrawals and things like this, was because it didn't adhere to certain things like advertising and the way it was promoting things and this, that and the other. LCX has already got pretty much all of the regulation that blockchain requires, as well as the regulations around the world already in place. This is really important when we're talking about the infrastructure that's coming. We talk a lot about things like ISO, the 222 standardizations. We also talk about the interoperability and the creational factor of things like stable coins within government coins. We're talking about CBDCs here, for example, fiat ramping and all of this kind of thing. Specific trading pairs where we will indeed have like pegged CBDC systems very soon in the coming years. This is all very important. LCX is what I would call like a maybe gearing itself the way it presents itself to trade perhaps audience. I'm not talking about traders in traders like you and I, or retail investors, this, that and the other. We can use them, of course, but I feel like this is trying to be a bit more of a premium thing that you would see maybe, you know, like Fireblocks kind of level criteria. That's not, like I said, it's not to say that we can't use this as retail investors or anything like that, but you can for sure see as you plow through the website and everything, this is very geared towards some really nice premium feel to it. And I think as well with the partnerships, as I mentioned, there's a few here. We'll go into a bit more detail about some of these, but this is important also. Now, some partnerships are quite easy to just stick on pages, and most of them are because they've listed, right? They've just been a listing and they formulate a partnership, that's what they call it. But in 9 times out of 10, with the interesting components of LCX here, is they actually have a lot of integrations with these things as well. The Liechtenstein protocol, which we'll go into in a bit more detail in a second, is quite an important factor as well. But here's, for example, I'm just going to call out a few of these. I think most of you know about some of these, or at least have had introductions to them. So Polkadot, for example, the Polkadot parachain, using the parity aspect here of the integration aspect. This is really interesting. So for example, with the Polkadot blockchain, will unlock access for projects to the developing potential of tokenized securities. So security tokens, as I mentioned, security tokens is very important for the big top level investors or indeed traders. So security tokens, in my opinion, will be a really big focal point over the next few years. And Polkadot obviously has a big influence in that kind of side of things of the way it works. So the Polkadot ecosystem here, projects can leverage LCX's security token standard. So again, the really big focal point here about standardization and the regulation that it already has, to issue digital native security tokens in compliance with the frameworks and standards adopted by regulated financial entities. This is really cool. So this is allowing LCX enabled security tokens onto Polkadot. So there's a lot of interoperability here. And when you're talking about blockchain and the way the world is going with blockchain and even DAG systems, for example, it's really important to understand that interoperability is very, very important. It is so fundamental. And this is another example of how that is going to be working with the likes of this exchange. So there's a bit of back and forth with these two guys, which is really cool. Nice little image there. And we go to Hedera Hashgraph, one of my favorite projects, touching upon that kind of like DAG system. I'm not talking about Constellation here, albeit that they are actually one of the partners, which we'll go on to in a second. DAG is the direct acyclic graph. This is, in my opinion, the next evolution of blockchain and how everything will be automated, how everything will work cohesively. We talk about energy harvesting, food, agriculture, supply chain, cars, houses, everything being on this big algorithm, AI infrastructure, IoT, Internet of Things, or Internet of Everything in this case. And here we have, for example, as I mentioned, sometimes the partnerships are about listings, and that's mentioned here. But again, security token standard, develop a framework for the tokenization of securities, the infrastructure for security tokens and corporate tokens. Again, reiterating the point about being a bit more of an exclusive opportunity. And what's really interesting as well, if you think about this in the near future, Hedera Hashgraph has a massive multitude of very big projects, partnerships in both finance and electronics and everything. And we look at some of these names, imagine in the near future where some of these may float on some of the exchanges like LCX, as they do with like NASDAQ or the Dow Jones and things like this. It could be that some of these, and I know for a fact like IBM are working heavily on blockchain technology and everything like this. FIS, World Pay, by the way, guys, is absolutely huge. They themselves pretty much control whether a government or a country has money or not. They are the powerhouses of finance. So it's really cool to see that down the line, these guys could potentially integrate with these kind of exchanges. So here we go, for example, Hedera Network will leverage the platform infrastructure of LCX to expand the Hedera token service. Okay, the service, HTS. This is where I mentioned about the partners that Hedera has, but also the services that Hedera has when we were talking about the DAG systems and everything like that. Addition of new security token standard provides secure, reliable, transparent, and compliant infrastructure for digital securities to its users. Again, the Liechtenstein protocol mentioned here as well. This is just super cool for me because I hold a lot of these different tokens. It's probably why I'm picking them out, to be honest. So this here, the Liechtenstein, I hope I spelled that right. Liechtenstein, I hope I got that right. If you're German out there, do correct me. I think that's German or Austrian, one or the other. This looks German, has introduced a new legal framework called the Token and Trusted Technology Service Provider Act. Big long words there. Also known as the Blockchain Act. That's much better. Let's just use that from now on. Let's stop the Liechtenstein. We'll call it the Blockchain Act. Regulatory framework enables a technological neutral token definition, building the foundation for a tokenized economy. The new laws bridge the gap between the digital and the physical world. This is very important as well. And define key roles along the value chain of tokenization. I'm going to read every word. You can read through this yourselves. But again, compliance, tokenization, on-chain asset management, talking about here, time locking, burning, transaction monitoring, on-chain identity. This is a huge part of it. KYC, KYB, know your customer, know your business, is going to be evolving significantly over the next few years. Trust me. This whole thing with Twitter and Elon Musk, I guarantee, whether you heard this first, just say this is exclusive information. I guarantee to you the KYC moduling will come into the likes of social media. It is a long time coming. Too many people are anonymous, and too many people are hiding behind screens, whether not doing the right things or abusing people, whatever it is. It's got to stop. And KYC will stop this. And the only people that get frustrated and annoyed about KYC are because they're the ones that want to try and get away with stuff. I guarantee it. And this will change everything. You will be required, like maybe potentially for facial recognition, fingerprint recognition, biometrics, everything will change. This is really important on-chain identity aspect. Real-time cap table. This is about listing all holders on the digital securities. It's like token holder registry. Again, kind of like the KYC, but I'd say it's more about like the KYB aspect, and also ensuring that whatever goes on to the exchanges and to the users is compliant. Why I mention this is because of like the ISO protocols and everything like this. I'm starting to when the market comes back to hopefully a better stage, I will be removing probably 50% of my portfolio, moving them into the more of the compliant tokens, or at least being patient with some of them to suggest that actually they're working towards compliance, so I'll leave them in there. but I do think big things are coming over the next few years. And a couple more before we go into the chart and everything. Constellation Network here, DAG, DAG, obviously one of the big components of DAG technology, and conveniently they managed to grab that token name whenever that was, which is very clever of them. But Constellation is one of my favorite projects out there as well. So again, the supporting of listing tokens, but this as well, tokens created using the Constellation Network's layer 0 token standard. Now this is really interesting because Constellation and DAG in general is supposed to be coherently moving towards a feeless, pretty much a feeless aspect of how we deal with things. So when we do verifications or like things like proof of work, proof of staking, there's obviously a cost to that. Very minimal most cases these days because of the energy consumption and in general how it works. But these systems like IOTA, for example, like Hedera Hashgraph and Constellation are working towards this feeless thing. So this is going to help the automated world in the future. Could you imagine like simultaneously all the millions and millions of transactions going around? I'm not talking about finance, I'm talking about everything. Like if I go and take something out of the fridge, I always use this example, and then the fridge orders something, that is a transaction. But then the transaction also relays to, oh, the drone is going to harvest some more seeds because there's too much demand of a certain produce. And each of those times that it's doing these things or actions, the transition of transaction, that essentially would cost money usually. So therefore it's not sustainable. It's not possible. It's certainly cheaper than our existing systems, but eventually we will go on to feeless. This is really important. In integration of native wallets to support DAG, which is really cool. And utilizing as well the HTTP protocol. This is really important as well, to aim to state channel that validates trade data and thus brings many of the benefits of DeFi to a centralized exchange. So this is really, really interesting, and I like that aspect of centralization to an extent because it's probably going to pull in some of these other bigger companies. You just never know. We see how Coinbase is evolving all the time, and I think LCX could do something very similar, but maybe more of a premium feel to it. Especially now as Coinbase, I think, removed its pro section as well, doesn't it? And finally, one of my favorite projects and technologies, or indeed services, the DLT interoperability from Quant. Quant is going to be an absolute mega giant. This is what I really want to pinpoint here when it comes to standardizations and protocols. Quant chooses LCX as partner to enable DLT interoperability. Got that tick. And then partnership will further accelerate the progression towards central bank digital currencies. It's all interlaced, guys. And if you follow the money, honestly, you will reap the rewards. Many other exchanges don't focus on this side of things. LCX is another level in my opinion. It's just the fact that it's so early and not many people talk about it. Hopefully just these small snippets are enough for you to go and research yourselves. It's really important that you understand yourselves, go and learn more, go and compare them to other exchanges and what they're doing in the backgrounds. But for me, I'm talking about when I follow the money, I'm talking about the significant money. We talk about like the RTGS system, for example, that's going to replace Swift and Chaps, this kind of level. $720 billion pounds a day is transacted through the existing RTGS system. We're about to replace that with blockchain technology, and Quant is a big part of that. And clearly now, with this interoperability and aspect of LCX, who's to say that LCX would be the top dog exchange when it comes to proper pro and top traders, like we would see on Wall Street, like we would see in the London Stock Exchange. Really, really interesting, guys. I think this is a really big thing to be thinking about and understand more of. So please do your own research on this. I'm not saying like do your own research like to not trust anything we're saying or anything like that. It's more like I want you guys to learn. I want you guys to understand this more and more, because I really think we're in a special place right now to understand all of these things that are going on. And before I go into the proper chart, just mention that you can get this on various different platforms. Obviously, LCX itself, La Token, Bitrue is one of my favorite ones, and for sure, the likes of Kraken and Coinbase anyway. And I just also wanted to point out the overview of the chart before I go into the trade view version, because it doesn't go this far back. The reason I'm so interested right now is because we're having this bit of a stability in the market, but we're now matching points that we saw back here in July 2021 and almost nearly touching back down here on the 1st of April 2021. We've had highs up here. I don't know if this is fully accurate because I think it might have been higher than that, but for argument's sake, it has been at that 50-cent level. This is probably roughly, I think, around when Coinbase launched. So understandably, when the big exchanges come in and list tokens, you do tend to get a big push up. And of course, we had a nice uptake here earlier in the year, and then we're back down. So the reason I'm bringing that to your attention, in fact, we'll go into my proper chart here now to discuss that further, is simply because we have now got this kind of bottom area. I'm not saying that it won't go down lower, but it's now at this opportunity where I was buying LCX at various different price points anyway. I'm now sat here looking at this and going, wow, okay, for the next big bull run that we have eventually, there's a target point arguably around the 50-cent mark, right? So from this point here on, you could argue that as a minimum target, we're looking at these higher areas here. I think this is skewed. So let's just go roughly around this area, which is what CoinMarketCap was suggesting. So I'm just going to stick in here really quickly the price range move from this low area up to where we have roughly been before. This is a good 700-800% uptake, guys, right? Now, obviously, it could potentially come down lower. We have indeed tested a couple of times these lower regions at around 4.5 cents. Okay, this was a one-off here, but we have indeed been testing around this 5-cent mark. So it was almost like 4 cents, 4.5 cents was too low. We're now testing this 5-cent area, and since then, as with the rest of the market, we have been tailing up slightly. This could be a false move, but I do anticipate still that Bitcoin could potentially come down to those, maybe $12,000 to $15,000 marks. We'll have to see. There could be an upturn in narratives around the world, but right now we've got to understand that the world is still messy. Energy prices here in the UK are ridiculous. Fuel prices here, £2 a litre now. I'm sure it's similar across the world. There's negativity everywhere. So I can't believe for 1 second that we can go into a bull market in this situation. Who knows? I could be completely wrong. That's why you have to be strategic when it comes to investments, is that you have what I call dollar cost averaging up and down. You don't know the bottom, you don't know the top, but just don't ever chuck your money straight in. I just got paid, I'm going to throw my money in. I love that price point of 6.5 cents. Be strategic because anything can happen at any time. So be aware of percentage intakes and outtakes. So right now, as I mentioned, we've had these high points, but we're now at these lower regions. So me DCAing, I did DCA back here when it was around 5 cents. I'm not doing it so right now because we're on the upward trend. Sometimes it's difficult because that might fly up and you're like catching it, right? So, my next position would be is if it tracks back down to the lower region of 6 cents at this point in time to grab some more, just in case we are on an upward trend. And it might be nice to take some initial profits out or something like this in a short-term period. We'll go on to that in a second. But for me, I'm just being a bit more patient to see if we trade down here again. But like I said, with Bitcoin, if that does trigger downwards, we could potentially see a hit back down to these 4.5 cent levels. But if we revert back to the conversation about CoinMarketCap trend, we could see even potentially lower than that. But in regards to the future, you might just sit there and go, actually, I don't care whether it's 5 cents, 20 cents. I'm going to be buying it because I believe that LCX is going to be XYZ price in the future. I do think that probably by 2025, especially with the talk around CBDCs and regulations and things like this, we could be seeing well over the dollar as a bare minimum. I'd like to think this is a hell of a lot more. If you look at the likes of Qcoin and the way Binance did with its BNB token, you can see LCX doing the same. And similar with BitTrue as well. So I do think that this could be a minimum over that dollar mark and probably more towards, hopefully, that $5, $10 mark. Let us know what you think about that in the comments below, what your price predictions are for 2025. And the reason I talk about 2025 so much is because this is when I believe truly 99% in my head that the CBDCs and the financial system will switch over. And this will be a significant point in the history of finance and indeed maybe how the world works. So that's arguably one of my end games. I want to get out by that time, or at least a big percentage of my portfolio. But touching on before we wrap this video up, see here about the stabilization factor that I just mentioned a moment ago. We're in this bullish momentum here. That's why I'm not putting too much money in at the moment, because we have switched over. So there's not that bobbly effect anymore. And the RSIs back here on the 13th of June were, of course, very very low. They are slightly higher right now, and this is where I stop for a bit, because I'm looking at this like 49, 47 mark. Now, like I said, you might be new to LCX, and you might be thinking, oh, actually, this is a good entry point. I'm only saying it because I was in the lower regions, okay? So you can look for some stabilization here. Ideally, for me in my head, as I mentioned in many videos, whether I'm doing 2-week trading or monthly trading, in this instance, I'm going to talk about the monthly. I do try and look for those lower 40 marks. 47 is relatively high in the sense that if we do go into a bit of a good momentum over the month, if you look at it from a percentage wise, say that's nearly 50, and we get to 70 or 80, the percentage is obviously smaller than when I got it at 35 or 40, right? And it's like that double position is 2 times enough for me to really do anything with. That's why you want to try and capture the lower regions, and that's why as well you've got to look at all these different trends and indicators, because it's all good looking at the charts, but you actually have to look at the intricate details to where we are with movements as well to decide, actually, this right down here, for example, is a lower region, but you can start seeing on the 28-day and the 14-day where we are in the transition of everything. So for me, the 28-day was like, okay, that's a really low point. It could have gone lower, but actually at that point, I'm like, that's removing a lot of risk out of the situation. And before you know it, we're back up here, and we've gone from this like 22 mark to 49. So on a arguably within a month's time, or indeed the 28-day, let's look at the 28-day, for example, 32 to 47. It's not obviously half yet, but it's still a really good percentage. What's that, 25, 30%? I'm not sure. So do look at all these different aspects. Whether you're doing trading yourself or you research yourself, do start learning more about the indicators. There's loads of videos out there how to operate that. Or indeed, if you are watching videos like this, make sure that people do talk about the indicators and where we are with things, especially on the MACDs as well, because you can really start saying, are we in a bullish momentum? Are we stabilizing? Are we messing about? Or do we not know what's going on? Or are we just in a downward pattern? It's really important to understand that. And actually, sometimes it's really funny because here doesn't, on the chart up here, doesn't look like there's much movement, but actually there has been, and it's been really positive. And actually, if you pull it out into a different shape, you can see the small movement upwards. So it's really important. It's all about sometimes perception of what things look like. You have to look at intricate detail as well. So I'll just throw that point out there before I wrap up. Last things, indicators on the right hand side here. Nice to see on the week and the month. This is one of the first projects, by the way, I've seen that has a green on the month. So maybe that's happened today for a lot of other projects, but that's really good to see. And what I really like as well is the 3 months and the 6 months. They're in negative, but they're not as bad as a lot of the projects out there, which in my mind suggests that this is a really top project that people are believing in. They're holding it regardless. They don't care. So at the moment, on this technical indicator, it's saying to be in a sell mode. I don't think that means you have to sell. It's more like just be cautious that we might go down a bit lower, potentially still. We're not at that neutral level of stability. So keep an eye out for it all, guys. We're going to wrap up there. Hope you have enjoyed this video. We'll bring out more throughout the day and tomorrow. We're getting back on track finally with all these videos. Now we've got everything in place. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll indeed see you in the next LCX video. Bye-bye.